So this is the first of the Egeria webinar series that we're resuming. We're hoping to do these every month. And this is the first one. So this is the link that you need to do to get the latest information about the webinar. And we're going to talk about the open types and visualizations of them in this one. So I'd quickly just go through the webinar schedule that we have prepared for you. So to hopefully get you used to different parts of Egeria with the idea of trying to grow the community. And if you think it's as important as we do, then I'd hope that you would join us in the effort around open metadata. So today is all about an introduction, which is quite a good one, I think, a good place to start if you haven't done too much with Egeria, is the value proposition around the open types and why that's so important, and then how we can visualize those things. And then in October, this is the start of what do you do once you build a catalog. We have a catalog dojo that allows you can walk through and create a catalog for yourself. And once you've got that far, what do you do next? And this is the part one of that journey. So from manual cataloging to you starting to use automation around integration. And then in November, we have a joint webinar with ING Bank and Mandy Chesil, who is the leader of the Egeria community. And they'll be talking about open lineage, both the standard and the ING implementation. And then in December, we've got the Egeria's Kubernetes operators and what we've done with that, because that's a key thing to have in place to be adopted these days. And then in January, we have this time traveling with Egeria. So recently we've had Crux repository, which allows you to look back in time, look at the metadata you had at a particular time in the past, which is not something that other metadata servers have as a capability. So we were really excited about that, and we have APIs that expose that as well. Then we have how to build a repository connector. So if you want to link in your proprietary metadata repository and expose it in Egeria as part of the ecosystem, then we've got how you actually build that. And along the same sort of line, if you want to write an integration connector, then this is the place to do that. Then in April, we've got what next to do when you've built the catalog. So the next part is really becoming more mature with data in your organization. So what's the infrastructure and cultural changes you'll need to drive that sort of management of data? And then after that, we've got a strategic view about leading us up to data citizenship. So those last three are all part of the journey which Mandy will talk through. So hopefully you're as excited as we are. So it's going to be a good education series of sessions, and if there's anything you want from those sessions or any sessions that you feel we ought to do, or if you want to present, then let us know via the Slack channels, and we can look to do the next one. So this one is all about visualizing a metadata ecosystem around an Egeria one, and so it's going to comprise of 3 sections. We're going to have a piece on the open types, an overview, and also why they're so important. And then we're going to have a bit on the visualization, and then a demo, which I've videoed yesterday, so that we can take you through the visualizations around types and the instances of types that Egeria has. So this is the place that I always like to start, is a sort of very high level that Egeria has got these layers. So we have a deployment resources at the bottom, we have a development platform, and as we go up the pyramid, we get towards the governance solutions at the top. So this is all the things, the activities that the Egeria community gets involved with. And the governance solutions are these sophisticated solutions that your governance team would run in order to be able to govern metadata across your organization. So those solutions we have in some of the dojos have worked out. We have a lot of the APIs around them. So they're definitely still being developed in some areas, and we have quite mature versions in other areas. So splitting that down, what does this actually mean in terms of the parts of Egeria? So this is a sort of detail of, if you can have a look at the bottom, deployment resources. This is how you get Egeria into going, deployed, running in a sort of the way you would expect these days with containers. So with the Kubernetes operator, which we have a basic version of, and we're working on at the moment to improve, and Helm charts and the like with Docker images. And then there's the sort of core of Egeria, these OMAS services, which centers, which contains the open metadata types, which we're going to talk about in this session. So I've highlighted them, the content of those. We have the integration above them, and we have education, the hands-on labs, and the top sections is these governance solutions that we talked about. Myself, I'm an Egeria maintainer, and I've been involved with the subject area management, so the semantic sides of glossaries and glossary terms and the like. So I thought, since we're restarting, I would go back to some of the basics about how Egeria is structured. So we have these layers. We have existing metadata repositories are the blue parts at the bottom. So they're often written by a particular vendor in a particular format, in a technical format, and they have their own APIs, which there's wonderful tools around from each vendor. But what Egeria's value proposition is all about is how do you get a view across all the data in your organizations. So they live in these different metadata repositories or places where metadata is present. And what this ecosystem, this Egeria ecosystem is bringing is a view across all of it. So this is where the open types comes in. So that's the open types is the standard way that we communicate. So the actual protocol that we use is the OMRS, these Open Metadata Repository Services. So this is the language, the API that you use when you're talking to each of these local repositories. Above that layer, there is an access services layer. And the access services layer allows you to take the quite sophisticated metadata that we have underneath and just take a view that's appropriate for a particular tool or user or use case or persona. So it's like a net of metadata has got everything there. It's quite difficult to deal with, but if you pick up that net at a particular place, maybe on an asset, and you form a tree, then everything, your view maybe would be all around that tree. So, so you would have a very asset-centric view of the world, but a governance team might want to have a governance policy view of the world. So each of the users of the metadata are given an appropriate subset that they can use. And we've worked with experts in the various use cases to try and refine and get the sorts of access services that they want. So when you issue calls at this access service layer, it goes through the OMRS. And the OMRS enterprise layer does federated queries to allow you to get a view across all of these repositories. And this is in a bit more detail. So the enterprise OMRS will actually talk to the local OMRS. The reason I'm mentioning this when I'm talking about types is that the OMRS cares intimately about the open types. So the way you structure information in the OMRS is to say this is a thing, an entity, for example, or a relationship, and that's the primary thing that the OMRS deals with, and each of those entities and relationships has a type, and those types are the open types. So another way of looking at the Egeria is how these all the pieces would fit together operationally. So we have these sorts of capabilities operationally. We have at the top here, we have a browser, a user interface going through the presentation server. We have a view server, which serves up UI appropriate payloads. And this is where the open types would be important. The metadata server and the metadata repository would be where the open types comes into place, as well as the repository proxy. Because what these things are doing is there is a representation of maybe a database table or a schema type or whatever it is, a glossary term that exists in the proprietary metadata repository. And what you do is you connect into the Egeria metadata server or repository proxy, and you map your types to the open types so that they just stay the way they are. And you get the benefit of using, by going through some of these higher level APIs, of getting a view across all of the metadata repositories by using these access points, the OMAS APIs that we talked about. And by being part of this ecosystem, in addition to being a target for these federated queries, you can also enhance your metadata if you'd like. And it's in a controlled way, you can pick up metadata from other metadata repositories. And all of that is done. It's not really going to be covered so much here in this one, but across using a cohort topic. We have a Kafka implementation that is eventing for us. So patterns around data before, what I'm saying before Egeria, and patterns that I'm noticing, and this isn't complete, but this is just one way of looking at it, can often have silos of information that you can access those, that bits of information in the way that is being prepared for the particular consumption of a particular application for a particular, from a particular vendor, potentially. So there might be the odd bit of integration, often point to point. And here is the way that can be done is these one-off point in time imports, where potentially you then have to work out all the mappings between two metadata repositories and try to make sure that you haven't lost information, and you do this import, and potentially then that import is there, and you've got the benefit of the metadata from the other system, but you've got issues about who actually masters it, who is the boss, who's responsible for that data now. Is it the original system or is it the new system? And it potentially can all get stale as well, because it's a point in time at the time of import. So having a more dynamic ecosystem is the way that the Egeria world would have it. You map these things once to these open types, the open types we hope are sophisticated and descriptive enough that would meet your needs, but they are extensible. So and then you get the benefits of being able to issue these dynamic federated queries across all the metadata that's linked into the Egeria system. So you could use the Egeria APIs to get to see all of the metadata in your ecosystem, and therefore govern it coherently and consistently. So the open types, these are building blocks, and the way I was thinking about it in terms of a metaphor was that the entities, relationships and classifications are a bit like elementary particles in physics. Everything is made of them, so they're fundamental to everything. And then the OMRS types are like atoms, and so they're made of these, and they are entities and relationships. They're grouped together like the periodic table is, and certain types can be related to other types, like atoms can bond together. And then the types, the OMAS types are like molecules. They're being put together for a higher level, and these chemicals act in a different way from the constituents, and much more useful. and the molecule can relate to other molecules. This metaphor isn't totally consistent, but it's I quite like the way that we've got these layers in the architecture, and they do remind me of atoms and molecules. And then going up further, we've got sort of governance processes across, because everything's in written in a standard way in these open types. It's a bit like metabolisms in life, and having processes in place for stability, integrity, sustainability, for well-being, for growth, all these things that allow autonomous people to exist, or organizations to thrive around data. So the data is almost like Egeria being the heart of all this, pumping around the data around these ecosystems to allow it to be successful and to grow. So the next stage, of course, is these. We think community is very important. So this is sort of a level above that. So in addition to these layers, which I'm sort of viewing in the code, we've also got community. We've got lots of an open source community there with lots of different perspectives coming together and making decisions that I don't think we would have made in isolation. We're much better as a whole with all of the different voices coming together to build a way that we talk with each other. So I think it's very important because Egeria is all about how metadata repositories talk to each other. The community needs to, it really needs a successful, vibrant community with the various people and expertise, people with different expertise talking to each other, so that we can get the benefit of all of that. So in a bit more detail, if you want to find out more about these types, we have UML diagrams on the website in the documentation. So this is a sort of quick cheat sheet about how you learn what you're looking at when you look at this UML diagram. So you have, we talked about entities, which are the things, they're the things that we have. And then we have relationships, which relate to entities together. So metadata, we think is often the relationships between entities are more important than the entities themselves, because they show you how things, show you the context of a particular piece of metadata. And that context for Egeria is very rich, because we have these open types defined with all of the relationships between them defined within the types. The other thing we have is classifications. So you can use classifications, for example, to say how secure something is. We have a confidentiality one, a confidence one, criticality one, a different classification, and we use them also for more technical reasons as well. So the two different, they're in the code, there are type defs and attribute defs. So we have these entities, classifications, and relationships. And we also have at this sort of lower level, enums, collections, and primitives. And if you want to look at the formal meta model, I put the link there. So this is just an overview, sort of big animal picture. So the open types are divided into areas. These numbers are the areas associated with them. So we have the glossary area, we have an asset area, we have governance. The open types are really a trade language, a lingua franca. They're what allows us to communicate in a standard way. So when we talk about an asset, we mean the same thing on both ends, is the idea. So that when you map in from your view of an asset, which will be very similar to another person's view of an asset, you map in the appropriate fields that it makes sense in the Egeria world, and we hope this will then facilitate communication and integration. And these types have to be open, because it could easily be one vendor could easily set up a set of proprietary types, but the idea is we want these to be open types so that they can be used without a particular vendor owning the types themselves. The types can be extended and the community can enhance the types as well, so they are extensible. This is the next level of detail. We're not going to go into all the details here, but the bits I'll just draw you to I'll draw your attention to look at these lines. These lines are, these relationships are ways that different parts of the metadata, seemingly different metadata, actually relate to each other, and those relationships are codified in the open type system. So you can see here we have semantic things in the middle, we have asset related things at the bottom, governance, infrastructure things, discovery. So there's a very rich description of the things that we think are important when the data that would be, and the metadata associated with the data that you would need to govern your data. So they can change to, an open type has properties, so a type would have attributes. There's options, there's extended mapping standards, so you could map them to another. If you have if there's an existing standard, you could map them there and tag that in the type def, and what statuses your instances can be in. And also for entities, you can have super types, so an entity can extend another entity, so an inheritance sort of model. And we have type def patches, so a patch can change a type def. The whole idea is we're trying not to introduce breaking changes, so you can always use the types. So you're not allowed to delete an attribute from an entity, for example. So what we try to do is deprecate an existing one. If we find we want to make a change that would be breaking, we deprecate the existing name and introducing a new one with the shape that's required. So when you start up Egeria, you see the types coming in. The types are in a content pack, which is a type of archive, and it includes all the patches that we have. So all the previous types are known about by the current system. You can also add your own types in there as well. If you put your own archives in the configuration, you can bring in those types. And the open types, oh, missed an S there. The open types are defined here. So you'll notice they're in the resources section of the code, not in the place where all the Java is. So it's if you've gone to look at it and didn't find it with the code, they are actually separate as a separate resources and managed separately in this resources section. If you want to see the open types in JSON, you can generate them using this utility. I just did a find for the JSON file, and you'll see that it's in the content. This is from an IntelliJ workspace. So if you were to clone our Git and issue that command, you would see that it's in the latest sort of released here. This is set up for the next release, and it's also in the content pack folder. So we have, you'll see them in the startup. You see the patch, you'll see the version number, and you'll see that we have 4. So we have 4 of them which are which are version 1, and we have that many which have got 2 versions and 3 that are. So every time you apply a patch, the version number goes up by 1. So there's many of the 648 patches, many of them haven't been patched, but it looks like 130 or so have been patched, and some of them have been patched more than once. You can see that we're accumulating deprecated types as well, because Egeria is a vibrant, growing community and code base. As we learn more about how the types could be specified better, we make changes to them in these patches, and we deprecate versions that we don't think are as useful, but they're still there and supported. So if you want to see the details of all of these patches and when they came in a particular release, then these are the code, these are the folders that you need to look at. So you have archives for the current release, these are candidate types, and they would, and then we have all the previous patches for each of the releases. So if there's a release which puts out patches, 3.0 didn't produce any patches, so we didn't do one then. But if there's type dev patches, then they will end up in one of these archives associated with the release. And if you want to get new types in, you put them into master, and then as we release them, we get a released version of the archive, and then we would accumulate the new current release ones. So just to iterate again, we really don't want to do any breaking changes. So instead we deprecate and add a new type. So that was my overview of the open types. I'll talk quickly about the visualizations, and then I'll give you, I've got a video that I'm going to, that I've taken on, that I've recorded yesterday to be able to show you the visualizations we have in Egeria. The sort of visualizations that we have around the types is, so just to say that the first one would be the existing UIs can still be used with a proprietary metadata repository. So just because you take Egeria, it doesn't mean that your Egeria is taking over. It means that Egeria is there to help you augment your metadata if you want it to, or if you use the Egeria APIs, you can get a view across all the repositories. So this is an and not an or. So it's not trying to displace any existing metadata repositories. Another way to visualize is through it's a sort of visualizations. It's a sort of these narratives that we have written in Jupyter notebooks that allow you to go through various use cases associated with our Coca Pharmaceuticals made-up company, to showcase the sort of things that a data-orientated organization would go through, and showing how Egeria can make that so much easier. We have the Egeria UI for general users, so a UI that ING Bank has put together that allows you to look at assets and explore lineage. And then we have the Egeria React UI, which is geared around the roles in the governance team. So this is more around solutions, that top level solutions. So it contains the glossary author use case currently, and we're going to work out other use cases. I'm the person that's doing the UIs at the moment, with other people contributing as well. We hope to flesh out other governance use cases. So it'd be interesting to know which one you want, whether you want to help with this effort. So the Egeria React UI uses React, Node.js, and D3. So the sorts of things you can get in the when you use these this UI, the React UI, is you can get a view across all of your types and the instances of types. So we have these open types, then we have instances of the types, which is the actual metadata. So you can get a view across all the repositories, across content from different technologies, across different implementations and formats. So this is just the same picture again. So with this, I'm going to show you some visualizations around the type explorer, which will literally show you the open types. The repository explorer at that bottom layer is showing you the instances of the open types, the entities and relationships and classifications. I will then show you subject area management API we call the glossary author, and show how the open types are shown slightly differently through there, just to make them more consumable for that particular user. And I'm not going to show this, but there's an open lineage explorer, which the ING Bank has done, and that will be talked about in the November webinar. One for the future, we're looking probably at the asset ownership and management and the governance program as extra parts that we'll be putting into the React UI. There's also something called a community profile, which is going to allow you to log on as part of the governance team and see with your profile, so you only see what's appropriate to you. You see your projects, and it will kickstart you into your process in a much more user-friendly way than having to work out where to start with all the UIs. I think the UIs are pretty good at the moment, but this will really allow you to get a much more sort of appropriate experience. So it's a personalized experience. So what I'm going to do is switch over. So I logged on the system, and what I'm going to show you is the Type Explorer. I'm going to just start and stop this. So in the Type Explorer, what you do is when you come in there, you have a list of servers you can look at, because different servers may actually support different subsets of the types. So you can see here we've got a tree of types. These are that are all the types from the top level. And these lines that are going off left to right are inheritance lines. So you can see there's an asset there. So if you want to focus on that asset, you can focus on that. And you can see on the left, it's now giving you a set of associated relationships. And it's also, I've moved it to the neighborhood view, so you can see all the relationships from an assets point of view. So if you're trying to get your head around the open types and what it means, what relationships a particular entity can have, is all governed by the open types. So you can have an explore around these types in the Type Explorer. But one thing I'd just point out that you can see here, an asset's connected to a glossary term, but it's also connected to a lot of other things, some of which might not be relevant to a user. So working at this level is a person in the governance team could easily get swamped with this amount of information if it was all populated. So that's why working at one of the higher level, the OMAS level and the view server level, is hopefully going to give a much more appropriate showing of the metadata than this very low level. But this would be a very useful thing for education and for architects to understand what the open types are about. So understanding the open types is something that you need to do if you were to write a repository connector, because you want to be doing the appropriate mapping. So now what I'm going to do is show you the repository explorer. So it's a very similar setup. You choose the server you want to look at, and then you can look at the entities by type. So if we look at glossary, for example, and then we search. Now I've got a very big glossary in here, which is an industry model from IBM. And what you can see here is I've highlighted it. It's highlighted on the canvas. So that's what we clicked on selected. You can see there's the license associated with it. You can then explore it. So you press the explore, and what you can see here is you get an idea about how many of the various different types of things that there are. So having 3,547 glossary terms is going to really swamp this canvas. So you can get an idea that you could start filtering down to choose a low number that might be you could work with. So that's this idea is a filtering down to make the UI more usable, because if we just showed everything, it would probably paint the whole screen black, which wouldn't be very helpful. So in this case, we're going to choose the 65 glossary categories, and they're visualizing. So I'm using this big glossary to prove that it can be used with a real glossary. So the idea behind the Rex, the repository explorer, is that you can start with a particular entity or a particular relationship and start following links around your repository. So we started there at the glossary. We've now gone out to supply chain, which is a category, if you remember. And then it's got 28 glossary terms. And those glossary terms are now sort of swimming their way to the bottom. By default, what this is trying to do is by time, put more information as you go down the screen. So it's trying to place it in terms of time-based. You can change it to proximity-based, in which case it would try and space out everything equally without reference to when you put it on there. So what I did there was I switched on to the glossary author. The glossary author is one of those governance solutions APIs for a subject area expert. So they would be authoring glossary terms and glossaries and categories and the like. So here we're going to do a bit of exploration. So we can, as it's an authoring API, you can create things and edit things and delete things where appropriate. So here I'm calling it just Gore. And then we can do next and create and finish. So what we've now got 2 of these glossaries. I'm just going to go into that big glossary and see what that looks like. So here you can see there's 5 categories underneath the glossary. So it's really, you don't have to choose that. You've really only got categories and terms to choose between. So it's trying to make things a lot simpler. It's showing you in this sort of driving down through the levels in the visualization. We've got a breadcrumb here to help you understand where you've been. So we started with a glossary. We have an identifier for that glossary. These are clickable links, so you can go back once you've gone down through to your nested layers. The other thing that it has here is only showing you 5, so you can change the number you see on a page. So so it has paging, so it should be a bit more responsive because it's only getting what it needs to display. It's not getting everything. So the other thing that it has, we've moved over using the style that we had in Rex. We've written a similar visualization, but allowing you to do all that exploration. But instead of using those low-level OMRS APIs, we're actually using the high-level OMAS APIs. So things should be presented in an easier way. So, for example, a category has a description like it did in the OMRS type, but it's also got a little piece identifying the glossary it's associated with and the parent category it's associated with. It's just JSON at the moment. We could make that prettier, but you get the idea that these APIs are hopefully a bit more contained. It's more of a business object than one of these low-level granular OMRS style entities. In the same way as we had before, you could explore. So explore, and we get a little we get a little flower that like we had before. And the other thing that we have is categories and glossaries and terms are all have their own different icon. So you can see hopefully a little more, because there's only a very small number of types we're dealing with. You can see here that this is actually a different thing to one of these things. So that is their category icon. But the icons will probably change so that they're more consistent with the way that glossaries are defined in the non-React UI. But there's one of the benefits of using this UI is that we've got unique icons for the different things. This is navigating around. So another thing you can do is add to the canvas. So I can search, and we can find our other glossary, which we just created. We can pop that onto the canvas as well. It's swimming down there because of the time thing. And once you drag it, so I've got this pick. Once you've dragged anything, it stays put. So you can see it says pinned dragged entities. So the core glossary stays put once you've dragged it. So we've just selected a term there, which was the churn term, which is a sort of analytics thing. And we're exploring around that churn. Can find information around that term. So you can work your way through exploring what's connected to what. And the content, of course, might actually live in different repositories, but you were working here at a sort of more of an abstract layer. So because what's actually important to you is understanding the glossary relationships. So on here, because it's an authoring UI, we can actually create new things. So you can create a new term. So I've called it person. And then you associate it with a glossary. So I'm associating it with the core glossary. Created it there. And it's actually appeared at the bottom. We can go to person, we can then explore and find the relationship to its glossary. So it's a way of doing some authoring there. So the next thing I'm doing is I'm just going to update. So I'm just showing you can do creates, updates, and you also do deletions, as well as the explorations. So you can explore using this API. You can explore using the sort of breadcrumb approach with the forms and drill down in that way, or you can, if you prefer, you can use the canvas approach, which is similar to the text and Rex approach. And we've now just given it a summary of human being for that person just added. And that's me just clicking on the breadcrumb to get back to the top level. It's like, yeah, that was me going through a quick whistle-top tour of the various visualizations. The other ones, just in case you're interested, is there is a server author UI, which is currently being worked on to allow you to define the configurations of new servers, which we're quite excited about. We're looking to create a story around how you can author servers and also operationalize them with a Kubernetes operator, and also drive a lot of the values from a metadata server. So those parts are coming together in a way that will allow us to do infrastructure governance in addition to the traditional data governance that we normally talk about. The other part is Dino, which is an operational view of the platforms and servers and the various services associated with the servers. So you can start and stop servers and the like with Dino. So these are more, well, this is operational, and this is around the authoring of servers. So I'll just pop back to the So that was all I was going to talk about. I was going to leave 10 minutes for questions if there are any. I haven't been looking at the chat, but I'll just quickly say that this webinar series is happening every month. We have about 8 months worth of content, and we expect to add to that. So if you've got any wish lists for it, next time we're talking about Mandy is presenting on the journey from manual cataloging to use a more of the integration approach, introducing automation and how that helps with cataloging. This is the first part of 3 parts that we're going to go through in the webinars around building a catalog. So there's the link again. So are there any questions? I think you